Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's hearing. I'll ask Mr. Minges to read the docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, folks. This proceeding in docket number 2018-13A concerns the application of Chem-Nuclear Systems, LLC, for adjustment in allowable cost and for identification of allowable cost. This matter has been scheduled for your hearing on April 25th, 2019, in the Commission's hearing room. Mr. Chairman, the docket's in order.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take appearances from the parties. Welcome, Mr. Black. Ma'am. Oh, yeah, we need for you to do that again in front of a microphone because nobody can hear you out there in the wide world. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm David Black. I'm counsel for Chem-Nuclear, and I'm here today with Benjamin Smith, the Director of Barnwell Operations for Chem-Nuclear.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Black. Welcome.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jeff Nelson on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Nelson. Okay, do we have, I think we've got some preliminary things we need to do before we start. So, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as and kind of set things up a little bit too. The matter here in front of the Commission this morning concerns the application of Chem-Nuclear Systems for an adjustment in the levels of allowable costs for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, and identification of allowable costs for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. In accordance with South Carolina Code Annotated Section 48-46-40, ORS obtained and audited the books and records of Chem-Nuclear. The examination of Chem-Nuclear's application and underlying financial records was prepared under the direction and supervision of ORS Deputy Director of Audit Daniel Sullivan, who is here today. Based on the results of ORS's examination, Chem-Nuclear accepted ORS's adjustments, and they filed an amended application with this Commission on March the 1st of this year, incorporating ORS's adjustments. Mr. Sullivan's examination report and exhibits were filed with the Commission on March the 15th of this year. As a preliminary matter, just this morning, we noted an error in the report, in the Exhibit 1 to the report, which was filed with the Commission. We had, unintentionally, of course, transposed the numbers under the variable costs between the vault costs and the labor and non-labor costs. Those numbers were flipped and should have been the opposite. We have prepared an amended Exhibit 1, which has been passed out to everybody this morning, including the company, which incorporates this change. With that being noted, Mr. Chairman, we would ask that the examination report of Mr. Sullivan, along with amended Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2, be entered in the record as the next hearing exhibit. Okay.
We'll enter it as Exhibit number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We did not pre-file any testimony in this case. However, Mr. Sullivan is here this morning, so if the Commission has any questions, we can certainly call Mr. Sullivan up to provide testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We don't get Mr. Sullivan on the stand a whole lot, so we might just want to call him up to talk a little bit. All right. Mr. Black. Yeah, let's punch that button and there we go.
Chem-Nuclear calls Mr. Smith to the stand.
Yeah, right on that table right there. Yeah, you're good. Punch that microphone, the button in front till the little red light comes on. Punch it again. You had it on and you hit it back off. There you go. You're on. Just get close to it when you talk so we can hear you.
Good morning, Mr. Smith.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name, position, and business address for the record?
My name is Benjamin S. Smith. My business address is 740 Osborne Road, Barnwell, South Carolina. I am employed by Chem-Nuclear Systems, LLC, CNS, a wholly owned subsidiary of Duratech Incorporated, which is, in turn, a wholly owned subsidiary of Energy Solutions, LLC. As Director, Barnwell Disposal Operations, I am responsible for the safe and proper disposal of low-level radioactive waste received at the disposal facility in accordance with the company's South Carolina radioactive material license. I am also responsible for management, supervision, and administration of disposal operations personnel, equipment, and buildings.
Please state your educational background and professional experience.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Geological Engineering from Washington State University, Pullman, Washington, and a Master's of Engineering in Civil Engineering from the University of South Carolina. I am a registered professional engineer in South Carolina and Colorado, and a registered professional geologist in South Carolina and Washington. I'm also certified as a groundwater well driller in South Carolina. I have over 30 years of experience at the Barnwell Disposal Facility in various positions, starting as a geotechnical engineer, progressing to senior project engineer involved in design and construction management on the site, regulatory compliance, financial management, and program management for large component projects, Phase 1 decommissioning activities, and other special projects at the disposal site. I've been employed with CNS since 1986 and assumed my present position in August of 2017.
Have you previously provided testimony before the Public Service Commission?
Yes, last year was my first time testifying before the Public Service Commission.
And what is the purpose of your testimony today?
My testimony will provide information to the Commission about the disposal site operations relative to disposal of low-level radioactive waste at the disposal facility located in Barnwell County, South Carolina. My testimony will be based on the amended application instead of the original application filed in September of 2018. The amended application, including amended Exhibits A, B, and C, reflects the agreed-upon changes resulting from the Office of Regulatory Staff's annual audit of our allowable costs. My testimony will also focus on the principal differences in categories of costs between costs we actually incurred in fiscal year 2018 and the estimated costs identified in Commission Order 2018-371. Finally, my testimony will summarize the costs we are requesting the Commission to identify as allowable for fiscal year 2018-19 as shown in amended Exhibit C.
And are you the same Benjamin Smith that prepared 11 pages of direct testimony that was filed with the Commission on March 1, 2019?
Yes, I am.
If those same questions were asked today, would your testimony remain the same?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, my pre-filed direct testimony is true, and my answers to the questions posed would be the same today if given orally from the stand.
At this time, I'd respectfully request that the Commission, that Mr. Smith's pre-filed direct testimony be read in the record as if giving orally from the stand.
Mr. Smith's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And in terms of exhibits, we can mark his direct testimony as Exhibit 2, I believe, along with the amended applications.
Okay. We'll have the amended application and the direct testimony as Exhibit 2.
Mr. Smith, have you also prepared a summary of your pre-filed testimony?
Yes, my summary testimony will explain the allowable costs incurred in fiscal year 2017-2018 and the costs proposed for fiscal years 2018-2019.
Please describe the allowable costs incurred in fiscal year 2017 to 2018 and compare those costs to the amounts identified in Commission Order 2018-371.
This part of my testimony will focus on the principal differences in categories of costs between actual costs incurred in fiscal year 2017-2018 and the costs identified in Commission Order number 2018-371. Fixed costs. Actual fixed costs incurred in fiscal year 2017-2018 were $71,805 more than the fixed costs identified in Commission Order number 2018-371. This was primarily due to an increase in corporate allocation, G&A, and legal support for the license appeal. As I mentioned in my 2018 testimony, Energy Solutions sold one of its business units in 2016. With one less business unit to divide up the total corporate G&A, each remaining business unit was allotted its respective portion of the allocation that would have been paid by that sold-off business unit. In the original application, Chem-Nuclear proposed an additional $18,215 in corporate allocation. When the ORS performed their annual audit, they allowed an additional $6,268, bringing the total adjustment to $24,483. The other category that primarily contributed to the increase in fixed costs is the legal support for the license appeal. Actual costs in this category were $61,706, an additional $27,706 over the amount identified in Commission Order number 2018-371. The increase was due to oral arguments before the South Carolina Supreme Court. The remaining categories in fixed costs brought the total fixed cost adjustment to $71,805. Remaining categories included labor, fringe, and non-labor, equipment leases and support, depreciation, and insurance. These categories represented a net of $19,616 of the $71,805. Therefore, Chem-Nuclear requests an adjustment of $71,805 in fixed costs as shown on amended Exhibit A. Variable costs. Variable costs consist of two parts. I will discuss variable labor and non-labor costs and then variable material costs for the concrete disposal vaults, variable vault costs. The variable labor and non-labor costs. The actual variable labor and non-labor costs experienced in the disposal of waste in fiscal year 2017-2018 resulted in a total variable labor and non-labor cost of $208,508.34. The actual variable labor and non-labor costs experienced in fiscal year 2017-2018 is $38,122.28, less than the amount that would have been anticipated based on rates provided in Commission Order number 2018-371. Chem-Nuclear requested no adjustment in this category of costs in the original application and no adjustment in the amended application. Variable material vault costs. The amount of actual variable material vault costs incurred in fiscal year 2017-2018 for standard disposal vaults was $477,553.12. This amount is $32,272.15 less than the amount calculated using rates identified in Commission Order number 2018-371. Chem-Nuclear requested no adjustment in this category of costs in the original application and no adjustment in this category of costs in the amended application. Irregular costs. Not all irregular costs for the year are known at this time, at the time a commission order is issued. Irregular costs are costs incurred for projects that may not occur each year or projects that occur each year but with varying costs. Irregular cost projects with varying annual costs include trench construction, site engineering and drawing updates, and other site construction projects. Examples of projects that may not recur each year are large component disposal and license renewal proceedings and hearings. Total actual irregular costs incurred for fiscal year 2017-2018 were $534,928.91, compared to the amount identified in Commission Order number 2017-378 of $532,367. Therefore, Chem-Nuclear seeks an adjustment of $2,561.91 in irregular costs. This amount is the same amount requested in the original application.
Please describe the cost proposed for fiscal year 2018 to 2019.
The costs proposed for fiscal year 2018-2019 are summarized in amended Exhibit C. Disposal operations in fiscal year 2018-2019 will continue to reflect smaller routine volume disposal site operations because the disposal site will continue to accept only waste from the 3 Atlantic Compact states. For fiscal year 2018-2019, we propose $3,384,567 in total fixed costs as shown on amended Exhibit C in the application. The original application proposed $3,585,762 in total fixed costs. As a result of the ORS audit, which reviewed actual costs from July 1st through December 31st, 2018, and projected costs for the remainder of this fiscal the fiscal year, this amount was adjusted down to the $3,384,567 proposed in the amended application. Proposed irregular costs. As discussed earlier, not all irregular costs were known at the time the application was submitted. The irregular costs identified in amended Exhibit C are based on projected costs incurred during the first half of fiscal year 2018-2019 and activities expected in the second half of the fiscal year. A total of $97,000 in various irregular project costs was summarized in Exhibit C to our original application. The amended application proposes a total of $132,474 in irregular costs, as shown in amended Exhibit C. The increase in irregular costs is primarily due to the addition of a cost of $60,000 for the third-party operations evaluation of the disposal site. The trench characterization and construction project increase was due to slit trench construction for irradiated hardware shipments, operational management for Trench 100, and to cover potential characterization work at Trench 100. Trench software project increase was due to enhancements to better protect waste receipt data. Proposed variable labor and non-labor cost rates. The variable labor and non-labor cost rates proposed for fiscal year 2018-2019 are based on actual experience during fiscal year 2017-2018 and then inflated by 3%. Proposed variable material vault cost rates. The vault cost rates proposed in amended Exhibit C are based on actual experience during fiscal year 2017-2018 and then inflated by 3%. The amounts shown on amended Exhibit C for variable material cost rates, vaults, are the same as those shown on Exhibit C of the original application.
Does that conclude your direct testimony?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Please answer any questions that ORS or the Commission may have.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners. Commissioner Belzer.
Good morning, Mr. Smith. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I note that going forward, there's $0 for the license appeal. Is that what y'all have agreed to with ORS? In the exhibits.
Yes.
I'm looking at your Exhibit C.
Yeah. That is the, I don't know that specifically we have an agreement with the ORS on that.
But y'all changed your application, and that's what's in the file.
That is what they reviewed, yes.
Okay.
So.
Are you familiar with the status of the license appeal?
Yes, I am.
And I believe that the Supreme Court issued an order last month. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So what is the status of the license appeal?
So the status of the license appeal is that the South Carolina Supreme Court issued a decision on March 27th, 2019. That opinion affirmed the Court of Appeals' conclusion that compliance with subsections 710.7, 711.11.1, and 711.11.2 of the regulations has not been demonstrated. It modifies the Court of Appeals' opinion that it can mandate specific actions must be taken in accomplishing technical requirements of Part 7. It modifies the Court of Appeals' opinion that the concept of a LARA may be ignored when satisfying the technical requirements of Part 7. And it remands to DHEC with no limitations to the record. It reverses the Court of Appeals' conclusion of noncompliance with subsection 711.11.4. This is of South Carolina Regulation 61-63. We believe that license renewal is not under threat. We will continue to work closely with DHEC and implement any additional actions required to demonstrate compliance with the sections of the regulations that are identified.
You referenced an acronym in your response, ALARA. Can you, for the record, say what that, it's ALARA. Can you say what that means?
That means as low as reasonably achievable, and in the, the world of radioactive waste management is to minimize dose to workers as well as, others that may, attained dose through the work that's performed. So they're allowing that should be a consideration in the determination of appropriate response to the addressing the compliance with those subsections.
So is there an operating license, or has an operating license been issued to Chem-Nuclear?
So we continue to be under what was called timely renewal from a license that was effective back essentially, I think, in the year 2000, if I have my dates right. There have been amendments made and accepted by DHEC since that time for administrative or other directives that came from elsewhere. So, but we operate under and have resubmitted every 5 years as required our license application since the time of the appeal to remain in this condition called timely renewal.
Okay. But the litigation that's ongoing is from the 05 renewal, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're going to have to go back to DHEC and based on the Supreme Court opinion, and then subsequent appeals could follow from that. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
Okay. So how does this decision affect the proposed cost for the 18-19 fiscal year?
So this is all very current as far as the Supreme Court decision. We initially do not anticipate any significant increases in cost to make the initial evaluations. Within the next week or so, we will be meeting with DHEC, so we're not in a position at this point to understand entirely the process and the timing of that process. But at least in these initial stages, we don't anticipate any significant change in cost for making the initial evaluations of where we go from here technically.
Are there buried vaults on site that are leaking? I wasn't sure when I looked at the opinion.
So there is, the vaults are not, the vaults provide containment for waste packages, and so the site has, there is contamination in the groundwater from historical operations at the facility that has been recognized for many years. And part of our compliance is that the groundwater, the condition of the groundwater at compliance locations complies with the regulations. And we continue to comply, and we project that we will continue to comply with those regulations. But for that reason, that there is contamination in the groundwater, that there was water that passed through disposal cells and came into contact with waste packages at one time or another. Now, vaults are a newer feature of this facility. This facility has been in place since 1971. Operations over those first probably decade plus did not include vaults and did not include many things that are part and parcel of operations now. So I would point out that some of what's reflected in the groundwater is based on early operations. Are
mitigation procedures going to be required to reduce some of that those levels, or is that going to be required of Chem-Nuclear in the future, do you think?
We have a mitigation. We have a document that provides what kind of actions we would take under certain circumstances of groundwater contamination levels. And our projections and would not suggest, and our trends do not suggest that those would come into play. Now, specific to the opinion speaks to different issues, and so that's a separate issue, I believe.
And the litigation costs with regard to this license renewal, those don't come under costs that the statutory operating margin applies to. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Smith.
Morning.
Got a couple of questions here for you. One, just discussing the vaults. I think this has come up in previous years. Commissioner Belser was just asking about that. I think you just now said the site started in 71, and I don't think you actually came there till 1986, you have in your testimony. When did the vaults come in? Long about just a few years before you started, after you started, or do you know? I think you said a decade, so somewhere between 1981 and when you started, or do you know?
Yeah, I'd like to provide that. They didn't come. They began for certain types of waste, and then became required for all waste at a later date. Mm-hmm. And if I could, I'd like to present those actual dates for the record, separately, if I could. So
we want to do a late file exhibit.
If that
maybe
would
get your attorney to file a late file exhibit
to give that actual dates, we can provide those. But I can't off the top of my head recall exact dates on those.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, could we do that?
Okay, we'll do that. Late file exhibit is hearing exhibit number 3.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, a couple more questions. On pages 8 and 9 of your testimony, you discuss the fixed costs that you state they increased primarily due to an increase in corporate allocation of general and administrative costs. You call it G&A costs, due to a sole business unit in 2016 and legal support for the license appeal. If the business unit was sold in 2016, why were the G&A costs underestimated for the 2017-2018 fiscal year?
So I would assume that we hadn't recognized the full impact of those, because I think last year's testimony, this was a discussion item as well, and we are anticipating that. Now, for the record, I would prefer not to speculate.
Sure.
But the speculation, I think, is that we are anticipating there would be additional corporate reductions coming.
Right.
And that, in fact, in our company has happened recently, where there have been changes in that regard. But that has happened in this more within probably the last 6 months.
Well, let's go down that path just a second. What were the corporate cost drivers? I think you said corporate G&A was $24,483, if I got my notes here right. And what were those drivers for G&A, general and administrative?
So it speaks back here on page 7 to speak to all the various elements of G&A.
Okay.
I could read through those. That allocation, including corporate executive management and support, contracts and finance, contracts legal support, human resources corporate support, accounting corporate support, and regulatory affairs and environmental safety, health, quality assurance, and security corporate support. So, and as well, there's a corporate information systems, information technology aspect. So those contribute to that G&A allocation.
All right, well, thank you for that. I want to ask you one specific question. Seems like a couple of years ago, probably not in last year's proceeding, but maybe 2, maybe even 3 years ago, we had a lot of discussion about the new trench software that you all were going to implement and that you needed. And I see you've got 15,000 in amended Exhibit C, and I think last year you just had 5. I guess what I'm saying, what I'm asking or wanting a little clarity on, if you spent the capital investments you did in the trench software system, and memory, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it's been a few years ago. Why are the costs bouncing back up? Seems like in this time.
So let's get down to. So you're looking at Exhibit C,
right?
So I have
amended Exhibit C. Yes, we're on.
Oh yeah.
Page 6 of 6, and my.
Just make sure. Okay. Yeah. So the issue of the trench database was a particular challenge in that we have an AS400 system, which recently I've seen articles in the news about municipalities having issues with their reaching the end of their support life cycle. So that led us to this concern that the entire history of trench records is maintained in this database. And so we were looking for the right solution for quite some time and different ways to address this. And this year, when I came on board, it was one of the initiatives I wanted to get settled because it has been pending for a long time. And we have now achieved and have expended some dollars in this current fiscal year, a solution where we can operate if the system goes down. We can now operate, and we have also made a full transfer of that database to DHEC, the regulatory agencies, so that they have those records as required by our performance objectives. So we have taken ourselves to a position where our risk is minimized now. And so, yes, I emphasize that we need to reach a solution. Maybe in those past years, probably maybe not so much expenditure. They didn't solve the problem.
Yes, because I remember your predecessor went to some lengths in one of these proceedings to tell us how important that software was, that you all be able to have that trench software and have that information. And anyway, do you think you're obviously, if these municipalities are having problems with it, do you think you all are close to getting things worked out with it?
We've made it so that we are not relying on that AS400 for the data that we're collecting. We have backups in case it goes down. So we have backup processes. They have been submitted to our regulatory agency to show how we would operate in case of problems with this system. Currently as a low volume site, we can move forward into the future, managing it in much more simpler ways. We're not generating a huge number of records year to year, so we can manage them through basic Excel processes, and we'll look at other simple database solutions. But I feel that we're at a point that you're not going to see any future, any near-term future significant costs in this area.
Well, thank you, sir. One or two more here. Kind of one or two more questions for you, following up a little bit where Commissioner Belser was with you. I believe you said this license was issued around 2000. So when does the current license expire then?
The current license expiration, we just submitted a renewal application in January of this year. I believe it's July of this year that it would normally expire.
So July of 2019, now coming up on us.
Correct.
All right. And I think you said you had reached an agreement with the ORS not to include additional legal expenses going forward, but then you talked about that you might anticipate some legal expenses due to environmental issues.
Well, I'd like to follow up on that because the question of the agreement with the ORS and where we're going with that. We believe that we're at a point where we're moving to resolution of this through technical evaluations and working with DHEC at that level. If they're obviously at some point in time there is a possibility of, as stated, a follow-up appeal. I mean, that's possible. So,
right. So you may have this discussion with ORS in next year's proceeding or prior to next year's proceeding. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I'd like to. I think I need to have additional conversation about this budget figure with the ORS.
You mean for next? You would for next year's proceeding?
Correct.
Lastly, will the Supreme Court's decision affect the timing and/or the funding requirements for the Decommissioning Trust Fund and the Extended Care Maintenance Fund? And our DTF and the Extended Care Maintenance Fund still sustainable going forward?
I don't believe that the ruling speaks to or puts at risk the issue the extended care fund adequacy in anything that currently is. I don't see a direct connection yet that we see that we would change how we evaluate the adequacy of the extended care fund based on how we might enhance our operations to address these issues that are on record at this time.
At this time. Thank you, Mr. Smith. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to have you with us this morning, sir. On page 11 of your pre-file direct testimony, you state that the proposed variable labor and non-labor cost rates and proposed variable material vault cost rates are based on actual experience during fiscal year 2017-2018, and then inflated by 3%. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why was it necessary to inflate those costs?
So just through normal inflationary pressure that we do purchase the vaults from a vendor that seeks some increase and also the normal increases for the labor that work.
Do you negotiate those costs, or is there more than one vendor that makes the vaults?
We have one vendor that makes vaults. We have periodically sought others to bid those out, but that is not a routine. But we strive to keep any changes reasonable in these pricings.
Well, is it just one source now for the vaults?
It is one source because it's any single source is quite an investment because they have to make these molds that are special for the vaults. So there's a pretty good investment to just be able to get into the market.
So do you know approximately how many you're going to need in any given year?
Yes, we do.
And do you know, then you can estimate how many you're going to need for the life of the project, I suppose.
Yeah, we can do that. There is variability based on the, relative to the kind of waste that we receive. So it could vary a little bit up or down. But
would it be cost saving if you could negotiate a larger purchase and store it on site for future use, rather than having to go back? 'Cause we can anticipate we're going to have more inflation. I mean, is it possible you could buy it in bulk, or these vaults in bulk, and store them on site use them as needed?
it's possible, yes.
Because the U.S. average inflation rate for 2019, I think, is about 1.8%.
Yeah, so the 3% is not that we're offering that to the vendor, but that is for purposes of budgeting.
Well, I would encourage you to look at it, and if you can fairly approximate what you're going to need in the future, perhaps you could negotiate a better price from the vendor and store them on site, and then you wouldn't have to go back, and face inflationary pressures every year.
Yeah, we'll take that under advice.
It wouldn't cost anything to store them, really, would it? You have a facility you can
we have space that we can store. Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again, Mr. Smith.
Thanks.
I have a question about the evaluation that I believe on page 11 is where you find it in your pre-file testimony.
Get into that microphone, Commissioner.
Okay. You state that the increase in irregular cost is due to the addition of the third-party operation evaluation. Who is performing this evaluation?
So we ended up hiring a company called Project Time and Cost out of Atlanta, Georgia. That's who performed it.
What was the purpose of the evaluation?
So we've been actively looking at all of our costs and across the board at ways that we can increase efficiency of operations. Energy Solutions began this with discussion with our customers to take a hard look at everything we do, and in agreement with those customers that we would bring in an independent party to take a look at as well. And so Project Time and Cost is complete with their primary task, which was to make an evaluation of opportunities for savings at Barnwell Disposal Facility Energy Solutions, as well as other aspects of our overall operation beyond simply Chem-Nuclear systems. So the extent of that work is complete, and we're moving on with those recommendations to look at what further things we might do to hold down or reduce costs of operations.
You think the money was well spent?
I really do think it was well spent. I didn't see there aren't significant findings of where we're going to see huge changes. I don't believe in expense. We've already pushed some things through before this happened that we should be reflected in future record here in costs. But it was a good effort to really look at all the potential, and so that we are not missing something that could have made a significant difference. So,
thank you very much, sir. Sounds like it was a well spent project.
I really think so, to give it, to have an independent, careful look at it. And that report is available, and you can see the extent of what they did. So,
Thank you, sir. I look forward to seeing you and Mr. Black next year.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, sir.
good morning.
I hope you had a good drive up from Barnwell. You live in Barnwell, right?
Actually live in Aiken.
Live in Aiken, okay. Well, I'm familiar with Aiken, a nice part of the state. I want to talk a little bit about your variable costs table, your variable cost table on page 2 of 6 of Exhibit A. The amended application shows 95 units for trench records and 70 units for ABC waste disposal. Why are there more trench records than waste disposal shipments?
Oftentimes, a shipment may include multiple packages, multiple records involved that have to be managed. So, it has to do with it is not always a one shipment, one record ratio.
Okay. Thank you for answering that question. I have a couple of questions out of general curiosity about your site. I think at present about 135 acres of the 235 acre site is filled.
I think the figure is about 122 acres are in a closed condition of the 235 acres that are licensed for disposal. We have another, I think the figure is about 17 acres that are currently considered available for future disposal. And so those two numbers do not add up to 235 acres, but that's generally where we stand.
When will the site reach capacity?
Our calculated capacity is somewhat slightly under 1 million cubic feet. We are bringing in approximately 9 to 12,000 cubic feet in recent years. So we don't see that changing except in the case of decommissioning projects that may bump that up in particular years or large components. So those figures would suggest that we have a fairly lengthy lifetime based on capacity remaining.
Okay. What is the company's relationship to the surrounding community? I know there have been issues with contamination, and I'm sure there are community members that are concerned about groundwater contamination. How has the company worked with the community to educate them about the water contamination coming from the site?
So, number one, for many years we've been have had very strong support locally. However, there may be individuals that are concerned at one time or another when information maybe is in a newspaper about the site, and so we sample many public, private wells around our facility. We have a significant monitoring program, but it also includes neighbors in that monitoring process, so that they have the confidence that their waters are not impacted by the operation. So, and it's now been a few years ago, but there were, DHEC puts out annual public information so that they have, a third party is giving the regulator is giving an assessment of the performance of the site. So they give an annual report. We are totally open door policy to have always been for coming to the site and understand the operations and the workings. So, and we've continued that policy for years, and that applies to anybody that knocks on the front door. We'll ask for and receive a tour and an open explanation of how we operate. So, those are things we do. We participate in the community for many, many years. Are strongly community support oriented, and it's resulted in, I think, strong local political support and strong public support. So,
All right. Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other? Commissioner Irvin.
Just to follow up on the groundwater contamination, I haven't seen an update recently in the newspaper or the press. Is it contaminated only one underground freshwater aquifer? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the disposal facility is one aquifer, the first aquifer below the a more clay unit near the surface of the site.
And how many miles down has it gone, if you know?
The area impacted is about 3,000 feet from the disposal facility to the headwaters of a nearby creek, which all residing within either state property or Energy Solutions owned property. To that,
you have wells that are actively monitoring those sites.
Yeah, we have many wells, and yes.
Is there an effort to try to use carbon filters to pull up some of the water and purify it? Is that something that's been tried?
The primary contaminant is tritium, and that kind of process wouldn't be
help.
effective. It is essentially an isotope of a hydrogen, and
Right.
It's acting like water.
And so the strategy is more containment.
It was to at the time of recognition many years ago is to improve the containment on the source end, and then project performance based on the source term into the future to demonstrate that what is in the groundwater and projected to be in the groundwater will maintain we will maintain compliance under those conditions.
Have you been able to identify which vaults were leaking?
So the terminology we would use is they're trenches, and so it's not that it's specifically vaults that are leaking, but it may be different areas of the facility, primarily based on the worst performance in areas early in the site. Many prior to the federal regulation 10 CFR 61, requiring changes that in waste forms and other things that impact movement of materials from containment into the groundwater. So it is very clear what areas contribute, but not down to the specifics of a vault. A vault, in this case, typically holds one package, and there will be many packages within many vaults within a trench.
Are there other mitigation efforts that might be feasible to try to as a containment strategy, or you think you've done all you can do, or doing all you can do?
Well, we believe we have added as our mitigation features the most appropriate and reasonable ones, and in that we believe that they're performing as intended. We did have a independent study performed to take a look at to excavate a cover location, to look at how the impact of time is affecting the covers that have been put in place. And so that was ultimately published by independent researchers. So we feel that the systems are performing as intended, and that we don't see any significant enhancements in that area at this time.
As nuclear facilities around the country are being decommissioned, the waste product from those facilities, will they potentially bring more product to to your facility?
Yeah. Of course, Atlanta Compact, any decommissioning facilities in the Atlanta Compact could, and we anticipate if they did, would increase year-over-year volumes.
And just to refresh my memory, what states are in the Atlantic Compact?
So South Carolina, New Jersey, and Connecticut.
Those are the only 3 states.
Correct.
We're accepting waste from.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, and the waste is all low-level waste?
It's all low-level waste, yes.
Okay, so let me ask you, I'd written, last year we'd said that, or you had said that even though the decommissioning trust fund was exhausted, that rates on waste disposal were set to include decommissioning trust funds amounts in them. Is this still the case?
Yeah, it is still the case, and that's just more of a historical collection of funding. That decommissioning trust fund does continue to exist at near zero. The process of reimbursing from those funds works through first, I believe, the decommissioning trust fund, then extended care for institutional costs.
Okay. And I think somebody else had asked you about the extended care maintenance fund. Is there a schedule or timeline for it to be exhausted, or is it still just like you said, managing at a low level?
Yeah, so that fund has been maintaining its balance over the last several years, fairly steady. I think around 149 million. It's been holding, even though there's been expenditures. One of the things that we're required to do in this calendar year is an updated decommissioning plan for the facility, which includes a new evaluation of the adequacy of the extended care fund. So that'll be one thing that we'll be, looking at in some detail this year.
Okay, good. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? All right. Mr. Black, any redirect? Thank you. Mr. Smith, thank you for your testimony and thank you for being here today, and you may step down.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Black, does that conclude the case for you?
It does, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to add that we'll get that late filed exhibit filed for you.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Nothing further from ORS, Mr.
Okay. Anybody want to hear from Mr. Sullivan? Okay. All right. Okay, hang on one second. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Minges and let him talk with you about proposed orders for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is May 20th an acceptable date for proposed orders?
That's fine with us. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else that needs to come before us in this hearing? Any of the parties?